Hello, everyone. This is Adam Meister, the Bitcoin Meister, the Disrupt Meister. Welcome to This Week in Bitcoin. Today is March the 6th, 2020. Strong hand, golden age of the 2020s. Halving hype? Bitcoin is next Bitcoin. In motion, offended by selling. Conviction, be a unique beast. Oh yeah, we've got 3 unique beasts here today. Juan Galt is in the house. I was just hanging out with him in Vegas. Kenn Bozak is here, but he has got a real strong hand. I admire this man. And we've got Chris Black making his long-anticipated return to the show. Oh my, things are going to get wacky when Chris Black is here. He is awesome. He stands for a lot, and he's not scared of anything. But before we get into all the controversy, before you pound that like button, let's talk about the big news of the week, okay? And there's just some disease out there of some sort that people are panicking over. And what does it mean for the cryptocurrency space? What does it mean for Bitcoin? Is 2020 just messed up now for all markets all over the world? Not just Bitcoin, but is everyone just going to lock themselves in their houses? Or are we entering a golden age where workforces will all work from home and become more efficient and spend online and buy a lot of Bitcoin? I like to look at the positive things. Have things changed in your own lives, people? Oh, we want to hear it. Or is it just a bunch of cryptocurrency guys on Twitter giving medical advice? Is that just what this all is? So, Juan, tell us about this Wuflu and what do you think is going on in terms of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and the expectations of this year? Will there be a halving hype? What's going on, Juan?
I think the Wuflu actually might be bad for Bitcoin's fundamentals in some sense, because the worse that it gets, the more people are going to want to actually just buy canned food and guns, you know? Like I'm very bullish on canned food right now, especially the worse that the Wuflu gets. And Bitcoin is good, but it's not necessarily gonna save you in this environment yet. It's not gold yet. It's not silver yet. It's not currency yet. It might be good. I don't know what impact it will have on. If international commerce dries up because China's on lockdown, that's also not necessarily good for Bitcoin. If people, I don't think the commerce is gonna dry up. There's definitely China. The lockdown on China is a big deal, and the other countries are getting kind of quarantined as well. But the overall markets are still moving and things are still going around. So that's kind of my first take on that. But my suspicion is that that's going to affect any kind of front running of the halvening that's going to happen. So I don't really expect price action like price to start going up steadily until the actual halvening happens and the supply actually halves, you know. Yeah.
All right. Do you before we move on to Chris here, I just want to ask you: do you think this thing is serious? Do you think you think a lot of people are going to die, are you worried as a healthy young man? You're a healthy young. I saw you in person. You handed me this thing here. It's Boulevard. So
right.
Do you think there's going to be?
Well, I think so. From what I've seen, it is very contagious. I think everybody's going to get it. I think that's inevitable. Everybody's going to get this thing. It's reasonably deadly, but it's not necessarily that much more deadly than the flu or the common cold. It's clear that it affects children and old people the most. It affects people that have certain conditions the most. The healthier you are, the better off you are. You just gotta take care of yourself. Take care of your immune system, and basically shelter the storm. Because I think everybody's gonna get it. We just gotta play it safe for the next few months.
All right, dudes. Everybody do some exercise and pound that like button. Chris, Look, Juan is getting sick there. Chris, what's your take on the economic impact? And
I was going to say, it sounds like Juan sounds like Trump and what Trump was saying. I was wondering if there's MAGA under that black sticker on your red hat.
It's just a flu, man. Flu, okay.
I think, sorry, like we don't know what's going to happen with. We're not doctors, right? But like, what's happening with the economy is interesting.
Yes.
With the Fed rate cut yesterday,
yes,
0.5%, which is significant when you think about how low we already are, and the impact that's having on regular people is, like I just did a video on my YouTube channel, released it today, looking at the actual interest rate that people are earning in their savings accounts right now. So the highest savings account interest rate you can get in the US right now is around 1.7%. And that's going to start dropping in the next week to about 1.2 because of the rate cut yesterday. Inflation is 2%. Right. So when you look at the interest you're earning minus inflation, you're negative. So anybody who's got money in their savings accounts is now at a negative interest rate. So will people start to look to crypto and specifically to stablecoins?
Yes.
To perhaps preserve their wealth more? They're still going to be subject to inflation with the stablecoin, but they won't be subject to negative interest rates. And if they use something like DAI, they can earn 8%. Right. And then 8% minus that 2% inflation leaves you with 6% real interest rate. So my question is, how much is that going to happen over the next, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but could it happen over the next 1, 2, 3 years if we continue to see rate cuts and go down into negative territory, not just with real interest rates, but with actual Fed interest rates? So that's my take on economic.
I like how you're slowly tying in DeFi to this. This is good. We're getting ready for the the big talk about that in a second. I do want to say, you logically explain why it's not fun to have negative interest rates and deal with fiat. But I mean, that's I don't know if people are going to learn their lesson this time around. I don't know. I hope that that even if like 2% of Americans understand what you just said and come into cryptocurrency, that would be great. But I don't even know.
Yeah, it's not complicated once you understand inflation, right? Because people see interest trickling into their savings account, and you get a few bucks a month and you see your balance going up and it's like, oh, I must be making money. I'm coming out net positive. But what they don't realize is 2% inflation completely obliterates that return, because the same $2,000 you have this year will buy less next year in terms of groceries, in terms of your car, in terms of whatever. And if they're going to start cutting rates even more because of the Wuflu, which they're predicting perhaps another 0.5% rate cut, which would take us down even farther into real negative returns when you look at inflation. And soon we're going to be like Europe, where in the US at least, where we have actual negative interest rates for money you hold in the bank. They want to incentivize spending. The only escape from that is to get out of fiat and into either equities trading or some sort of traditional investment, or into crypto. And if you want to be volatile and you want to go into one of the cryptos that are volatile, go for it. Or if you want to preserve your dollar, then use a stablecoin.
Value your wealth in Bitcoin, Adam Meister says. ZERP is coming. Well, we were already there once. But a negative NERP is going to follow in the United States. We will see it. And yes, I care, but I'm prepared for NERP. I value my wealth in Bitcoin. All right, Ken, what's your take on the sickness and the economy, et cetera, et cetera?
I'm vibing with Chris, man. I think to add on what he was saying too is it's a convenient distraction from a lot of things happening in the world at the time. And they're going to use it to get away with a lot of things like this interest cut and everything. We're going to see more and more things that would be louder on the mainstream media if the Wuflu wasn't there to kind of suffocate that information off of the airways. I think, hashtag, freedom for Hong Kong was probably one of the biggest victims of the Wuflu, that passed away, was that meaning, that moment, that movement that was happening in China really is what suffered the most. And yeah, Chris, I think you're right with these stable coins, man. I think people are looking at the solutions that Celsius is offering and what stable coins can provide, the hedge against, the fiat and the banking industry. And right now, I think we're actually in a potential, and I talked about this in my podcast last week with my friends, is we might see the first cash drought in my lifetime. Because of this Wuflu, they're disinfecting physical cash, taking physical money out of circulation. This is way bigger in China than it is here in the US. But we're probably going to see an incentive to use cash in environments where there is a drought of it. So you might actually get more for your dollar than your stable coin because the store may actually want your dollar so much they'll give you a kickback or a reward for not using a debit card or cryptocurrency, but for using paper money because they need it in the till. So I think that's interesting thought to have. Like, I never thought I would have saw a cash drought in my lifetime to see like paper money limited in supply and actually have more value than something, because it's scarce now.
Well, Zimbabwe had something like that. I'll tell you that. Now, let's, there's a question for me, but I want to ask Kenn this question. But first of all, Crypto Mania sent 20, I think their Czech Republic coin. Thank you, dude. He says, happy Friday. Thank you. Now, Reber73 says to me, but I'm asking this to Kenn because he travels around too. Are you going to slow down with the travel? A sick Meister or a sick Kenn won't help the crypto space.
Bro, as soon as I got home from NFT NYC, I've been sick since. And I think that was like 2 weeks ago. Like, I've had this cold I haven't been able to shake for days now. I think I will be cutting back. And I was actually just talking with my brother about this yesterday. My brother was like, this whole Wuflu thing's blown way out of proportion. I'm like, no. Remember West Nile, H1N1, bird flu, all these things that, popped up that were supposed to kill like 50% of the world population, like the Thanos snap, like this Wuflu's. They're telling you on the news the opposite of everything they told you about West Nile, bird flu, swine flu, all these things. Like, Zika was supposed to kill everybody, but who died? Who got? And that's what I'm saying. This one, they're saying, don't worry about it. It's fine. All the other ones, they were telling you to worry when you had nothing to worry about. Now that they're telling me not to worry, I'm worrying.
Well, so travel, you're cutting back on the travel. Now I'm going to answer the question here from my side. Now, first of all, if you guys check out the links below, follow all these guys on Twitter, by the way. But if you check out the links below, I actually discussed this at the end of my Wednesday show, I believe, if my travel schedule. And I was frustrated to hear that in the land of Israel, where I'm planning on spending 3 months, that they're basically not letting anyone in from Switzerland. Now, you're probably saying, well, what does that mean? Well, before I was to go to the land of Israel, I was going to spend 10 days in Switzerland and go straight to Tel Aviv. And that is supposed to happen on April the 30th. So I got an issue here. I want to travel as much as I'm not scared at all. Not at all. I am a perfectly healthy young man. I run 20 miles a week. Dude, I am in peak freaking shape. I'm ready to I'm not scared of this darn thing at all. I want to travel around the whole world. But I see some of these countries implementing restrictions with travel, and that's why and that cuts down on economic activity so much. And that's why I am curious to see if these countries are not going to be strict like Israel, or if they're all going to take this stance. If all the countries start banning people from all the countries that had Wuflu once, then no one's going anywhere. People are just going to travel around their own countries, and that's bad for the economy. I'm trying to think of ways that's good for Bitcoin, but Kenn talked about news stories that have been overtaken by this Wuflu thing, and obviously one of them was the Hong Kong thing. But another thing, I was expecting a lot of Halving Hype stories to come out. Well, the media probably won't be talking about the halving as much as they were, as I thought they would, if this thing is still going on at hyper speed panic in the beginning of, or in the middle of April, or the beginning of it. Let's see how things are at the beginning of April. It's springtime. Things should get better. I am an optimist. But, dude, I am very willing to travel anywhere. I wish there was I said this on Wednesday's show. I think there should be a country that just says, we don't care. We'll take in anyone. If you want to have an event here, have an event here. We're the anti-Wuflu country. We're the alpha male country. We will do it all. We're not scared. And so if you're that country, I will come to your country. I will do events there. I
don't know if that's how it works, Meister. I don't know if that's how it works.
Yeah,
well,
man.
anyway, I just went on my Wednesday rant there, but that was a question. So, I mean, this is all over the news. But guys, calm down. Be healthy. Just be healthy. Stay in the sun and exercise, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so
dude, it's funny because it sounds like the Wuflu is like Trump's proverbial wall. It's shutting down, traveling, immigration. It's like that non-tangible wall he always wanted.
It could be. For some countries, it definitely is becoming a wall. It definitely is. And I'm going to have to figure out if I'm going to have to cancel a trip to Switzerland in order to get into Israel.
Bummer.
All right. So, but I don't want my travel schedule to be cut down. I have no plans to cut it down at all, to answer the question. Okay. So we've got Chris here. And Chris is a dude I respect a lot because he likes the DeFi stuff, but he's willing to speak some DeFi truth. And some people might say it's not the truth, but let me read you one of Chris's quotes here. Okay. And then, okay. Interfering with natural selection in DeFi will only serve to weaken it. Allow the weak and vulnerable to fall by the wayside. Watch the strong and resilient rise and dominate. Well, I like that take. I don't believe in bailouts. Okay, I thought that's why people got into cryptocurrency, but perhaps I'm incorrect. So we're talking about DeFi because I know there are a lot of Bitcoin fans out there, but this DeFi thing is bringing people into the space. There are a lot of big moneyed entities that are curious about it, and will they stick with DeFi? Will they get into Bitcoin? Who knows what will happen? But it is something that affects us all. So, Chris, take it away with the DeFi truth.
Well, related to the tweet that you said there, we're kind of in an interesting time in DeFi and with Ethereum in general, I think, because we, like myself, I came into this whole thing from the Bitcoin point of view. I'm a lifelong libertarian who believes in economic liberty and wants to use crypto as a tool to get there. And I saw right away with DeFi that DeFi is capable of providing the financial services that we haven't seen on Bitcoin yet. And yeah, there's a debate over whether we may see them soon, but we haven't seen them yet, right? So I started looking at DeFi on Ethereum. What I've come to see now is we're starting to get to a point where you sort of have these two worlds colliding between the Ethereum that we've known for a long time, which is the really strong developer community, the sort of rainbow and unicorns vibe, right? And that's actually too. It's a huge. I mean, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of developers building on that platform and building these financial services that actually work. Then on the other side, you've got this crypto. Don't trust but verify mentality, and there's these two worlds colliding right now. And so what we're seeing is there's situations, as I'm sure you guys have heard about, where there's been money that's either been exploited out of some of these smart contracts or, suspicious transactions. Last week, we had a situation where we saw a transaction where a stablecoin swap where $89,000 went in, but almost $500,000 came out. Right. So the questions start getting asked, how the heck did that happen? What happened? And we have to figure out, talk to the developer and figure out what happened. How did somebody put in $89,000 and get out $500,000? Somebody's got to be paying that cost. So the tweet was really in reference to two things. It's reference to code. So if we see weak code and weaknesses in protocols, we need to not prop them up, not bail them out. Allow them to fall by the wayside and let the strongest protocols and projects rise up. Because if we want a resilient DeFi ecosystem, we got to let it be resilient. We can't prop up things that are weak. And then it also goes for taking criticism in the space. And that's something with the Ethereum community that they are not historically used to. But now that we've reached $1 billion in locked value, and who knows, in a year from now, it could very well be $10 billion in DeFi, the criticism is going to ramp up, especially when you lose $1 million here and there, right? So, and it's not going to necessarily come from inside the space. It's going to come from Bitcoiners. It's going to come from government regulators. It's going to come from people who existentially don't want this to happen. So that's the current state of things. With that being said, all this is creating a more resilient space. And my goal is to create a DeFi that's trustless, and that not to create it myself, I'm not a developer, but to see it be created, a trustless, resilient system that people can actually it can actually be at the level of the base layer of Ethereum as far as trustlessness.
I want to point one thing out. You said that the government and Bitcoiners don't want this. Let's drill down a little bit. I'm a Bitcoiner, and I think it's a great experiment. It doesn't affect me at all. I want it to do well. I think when other projects do well, it's good publicity for the entire. When they do bad, it's bad publicity. And if DeFi were to totally fall apart, people would just say Bitcoin fell apart. I mean, that's the word we're in. So I am of the mentality, don't destroy. There are plenty of Bitcoiners that just want Ethereum to die, etc., which I think is ridiculous. Just if you don't like it, ignore it. This is where to compete, don't complain. That's what I say. And so that's why I'm curious about this, because I understand. I've been in real estate before. I know different ways of financial instruments, and so I know people they're gonna get into this Ethereum DeFi thing. So why not have it be, try to make it on the up and up, like you're trying to put it out there as. So address the centralization aspect of it. They're all central. Mm-hmm. Every project is centralized to a certain extent. And so the name is decentralized finance. So there's a little irony there.
Yeah. So I'm a big advocate for transparency in the space. And just over the past couple months, we've come a long way. I actually started a project called DeFi Watch, and there's a website, DeFiWatch.net.
It's linked to below.
Great. Yeah. So what I did there was I started to outline a lot of the centralization risks that comes with every project. And here's the general idea. Most of these projects have the ability, with their admin key, they call it, their private key, which they're all in different configurations, but they can make upgrades, they can make changes to these smart contracts, because you got to think of these things like applications that might have bugs, right? That might have vulnerabilities. So they retain the right to be able to go in and fix it if something happens, because they don't want to lose their $50 million, $100 million in user deposits if a bug is found. And as any software developer knows, there's no such thing as completely bug-free code. It just doesn't exist, right? So that's what's happening in the initial stages. My take on this is, okay, that's okay if you give us a roadmap to how you're going to get to the trustlessness and decentralization that we want. If you can't provide us with that roadmap, if you can't tell us how you're going to get there, and then when we hold your feet to the fire, when you don't do it, if you don't continue down that path, then you don't deserve to be called decentralized finance. And at the end of this whole thing, Ethereum's definitely going to have centralized applications, no doubt, because it's too easy to do. And it's going to happen. It's going to continue to happen. I want this small corner of Ethereum to be carved out where we actually have decentralized finance that is trustless, that's censorship resistant, that's unstoppable. I want that little corner to be carved out for people who actually care about financial liberty, who don't want some developers to have control over their life savings, right? That's what Ethereum is fully capable of doing. That it's just, I feel like we're going to have to fight for it over the next couple of years.
All right. Guy Bennett sent $5 and he said, bring DeFi on, compete and don't complain. Anything that brings more people into the Bitcoin overlay is great. I will keep my Bitcoin strong hand. Yeah, that's a good attitude. I love this innovation stuff. Instead of worrying about the end of the world from some disease, this is this kind of thing I like to hear. Okay, I think it's a positive, and will get more people into alternative financial instruments. Before we go, I know Ken's got stuff to say about DeFi. Juan, what's your take on all of this, if you have a take?
Yeah, I mean, I think I really like Mike Kaiser's quote. He said with that, there's no capitalism without capital. And capital means capital investment. It means people are willing to risk their money to grow the economy and to invest in industry and invest in services and entrepreneurship and so on. And in that sense, I think the spirit of DeFi is on point. And I think Bitcoiners are lagging on financialization. I think mainly because they're concerned with other issues and because they're so much more risk averse. They're really trying to make sure this thing is rock solid. There are some developments there. I can't say that I understand details of DeFi very much, but I understand the fundamentals of Ethereum. And I think there's questions that I have about DeFi that maybe you can give me a couple of yes or no questions answers on this, Chris. Is there KYC on DeFi? Like, do you have to like log in with Coinbase or something like that? Generally speaking,
No, none of the proper DeFi apps have KYC or any kind of identity involved. You log in typically with a Web3 wallet like MetaMask. I don't know if you've ever used it before.
Yeah,
but
I have. Yeah.
Okay, so it allows you to log in just with that.
Got it.
My take on KYC is if there's KYC, you are no longer DeFi. You can't even be close to consider DeFi because you kill your censorship resistance.
And DeFi is giving people loans, is that right? With like and charging interest?
Yes.
Okay. So here's the thing that I'm concerned about, right? Like, it's hard enough to give a loan knowing the person and make that profitable, right? Like, traditionally, the banking sector, the private banking sector evolved out of banks taking the risk, investing in companies and looking for a return, right? And generally, they would invest in the more conservative companies, right? That's risky enough knowing your customer, right? And I understand that KYC is bad for terrible for privacy, and I'm no advocate of KYC, but that's hard enough. If you can create many sock puppets online and forge a complete identity and then get a DeFi loan, then yeah, you're gonna get exploits. I think that's gonna be and to whatever degree how they mitigate that, I'm not really sure. A lot of loans have been collateralized over the past, and collateral is a very important way to hedge trust, like, so instead of being fully trusted, you trust 20-30% and manage your risk that way. So that's one of my concerns, but I think it's great. I think that the spirit of it is great, and I think finance and capital lending and capitalism and private banking, those have to evolve out of this. To what degree needs to be 100% decentralized, I don't know. I think the less custody involved, the better. But to some degree, I think this is going to have to merge with society and merge with the legality of things.
Let me address something that you said.
Yeah.
So the loans, and I don't want to get into it too much here.
Sure.
I have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/Chris Bleck, where I have about 50 videos on this topic. So I encourage everybody to check it out, even if you don't plan to use it. It's good to learn. Every loan on DeFi right now is over collateralized. So that's kind of the secret sauce of what's happening right now with the loans on DeFi. Every single loan is over collateralized and algorithmically, programmatically liquidated if at a certain point, right? So you put in, for instance, 2 ETH, you borrow 100 DAI, and if your ETH drops too much in value, you get liquidated. And really, in this context, when you're just dealing with crypto like this, the main use case for it, because that's probably what you're thinking, like, why would anybody want to do that, is to leverage trade, right? Because you can, with that 100 DAI, you can buy more ETH. So you can get more ETH exposure and create that for yourself without having to use an exchange. Down the road, is that going to change? Are we going to have other ways to leverage over collateralized loans down the road? Maybe. I don't know. There are no under collateralized or no collateral loans yet. People are advertising that they're trying to develop this type of thing. I don't believe it's possible without what you said, without identity and KYC tied to it. And keep this in mind too. In traditional life, there's really no such thing as an under collateralized loan when you consider your reputation as collateral. And if you don't pay your credit card bill Yeah, you don't have to financially pay it if you file bankruptcy, but your reputation gets cut in half, your financial reputation, your credit score, etc. So we don't have that concept in DeFi yet, but maybe down the road. I mean, who knows what's going to come in a couple of years. People are also working on decentralized identity. So, but right now everything's over collateralized, so that eliminates the risk that the vulnerabilities that are happening are more code based, or people taking advantage of these weird economies that have been built to sort of front run and to do different things that are affecting the algorithms involved.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, I get that makes sense. In Bitcoin, if you want to get leverage, we have things like, again, they're centralized, but you have BitMEX, right? So just throw some Bitcoin at BitMEX, and then you leverage that, right? So it is centralized. I get that you guys, I guess, are building more decentralized solutions, more complex solutions. Anyway, I mean, I have the general sort of risk averse concerns that you're going to hear from Bitcoiners, but I think generally developing a lending market in this industry is a good thing, because being an entrepreneur in Bitcoin and crypto is hard, man. It's really tough. And if you don't have capital, it's even worse, right? But yeah, I don't know. That's all. The other thing is, like, and I wish we talked about Steemit earlier, because this proof of stake stuff, we're starting to see the downside of it, especially with Steemit. And that's a really fascinating drama. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that and come back to.
We are gonna. You're gonna talk about that one.
Yeah.
First of all, pound that like button, people. You're hearing some stuff you don't hear anywhere else. Kenn, what you've been silent here. I'm sure you've got some DeFi stuff to say. Commentary.
Well, they've been hitting the nail on the damn head, man. Like, again, Chris, I actually want to see what you think of this. You said that these DeFis, these DeFis are decentralized and don't have to worry about, like, developer code and stuff like that, right?
Well, what do you mean? They definitely have to worry about code.
Well, like, a developer isn't in, like, charge of, like, the centralized exchange, like Coinbase or Binance or whatever. But I do worry about, like, the centralization of the blockchain these DeFis are being built on, like Ethereum. All these DeFis are being built on a centralized, tech blockchain, Ethereum only. They're not, working on being multi-chain facet or working on other hedges against Ethereum. So if there were a bug in Ethereum, like you mentioned earlier, there is no bug-free code. So the bug that we haven't found yet in Ethereum that will expose the DeFi markets to XYZ issues that will occur haven't been thought out yet. I'm just wondering, like, what other blockchains besides Ethereum do you think are a catalyst to host a viable DeFi?
Okay, let me address a couple of things. So first, the current DeFi exchanges and products that exist, almost all of them are right now, as of today, pretty centralized in the fact that they all the core teams that have developed them have retained, like I said before, that admin key that gives them the ability to fix bugs. Okay, but that key also gives them the ability to radically change the code and divert funds, and there's all kinds of things they could potentially do. They can't do it with the existing code, but they can change the code to whatever they want.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's mechanisms in place. For instance, a lot of them have a time delay, so they want to increase the trust that you have to have, unfortunately, by adding a delay. So if they submitted a code upgrade, Compound, for instance, I believe has a 3-day delay where anybody can examine that code change on the blockchain before it goes into effect. So there's stuff they're trying to do to mitigate the trust that you need, but they are somewhat centralized. But again, like with Compound, they just announced they're decentralizing their whole platform. They're going to burn that key. They're going to do a decentralized governance system, kind of like MakerDAO, where users hold governance tokens and can vote on issues and code changes and stuff like that.
Doesn't that come down to some form of trust, though, and them burning that key? Like, we have to trust that they did that. Is there a way to prove that they? Okay, how would we verify that a DeFi exchange has burned their admin keys and is truly set to the wilds?
All of the code is open source and transparent on the blockchain, so you can read the code. You can see the admin key. You can see the backdoors that are coded in. You can see once they eliminate them, you can verify that. Anybody who can read Solidity is able to verify that information. And that's all completely.
Very few people, though, right? I mean, again, that's almost like centralized DOYR, right? Like,
there's tens of thousands of Ethereum developers.
Well, I mean, how many people had eyes on the DAO and that bug still got through? Is what I worry about when these DeFis are in the same.
Well, you're talking about two issues. One is, can you verify the code, the admin key has been pulled? And the answer to that is yes. If you're talking about a bug or some kind of almost all the bugs that are found, there's, first of all, there's companies, there's audit companies that all they do, they're independent auditors of code. Okay, the bugs that they typically find are not like hidden little back doors as much as they are where different parts of the code interact with each other in unexpected ways. Okay, so they're trying every different combination of what you can do to make sure that something bad is not going to happen. Now, even though they do that, it's not perfect, right? Because people are able to figure out different ways to manipulate the economies. And because all the DeFi protocols can be plugged into one another permissionlessly, you can create some really crazy stuff, right? That nobody ever thought of. Like there's a new concept called a flash loan that really just came to light over the past few months, even though it's been around a little longer. But the whole idea is there's these lending pools like Compound and Aave, and somebody can write a transaction where they can, with no collateral, borrow any amount of crypto from one of these lending pools. So let's say you want to borrow $100,000. The transaction begins with you borrowing that money. It ends with you repaying it all in one transaction. In between, you can do anything you want. You could run some arbitrage, you can trade here and there. As long as you begin and end with the same amount, you can keep the profit. Okay, so people are coming up with these and the craziest part of that is if you can't do it all in one transaction, the transaction never happened. So it's like one of those Schrodinger's cat things, right? So it's like it reverts the whole transaction. We're seeing some stuff right now that breaks your head, right? As far as like what's possible. And now we have to see how people are going to abuse it. And this is those flash loans.
Exactly what I'm trying to get into. I want to abuse the hell out of this, man. And that right there got every gear turning in my mind. Man.
Yeah.
Wow.
And those exploits you heard about over the last few weeks were using this technology. So, now we're seeing, okay, we need to bone up the code here and there and here and there. It's like we have to take these things into consideration, but it's like the Wild West, right? So it's like nobody could have even thought about this stuff 6 months ago because it didn't exist. So that addresses that. And then just to the Ethereum question, I definitely am not the one to stand up and say Ethereum is as decentralized as Bitcoin. Okay, it's a spectrum, right? There's centralized, there's decentralized, and there's everything in between. The question is, with all the hacks we've seen, how many of them have involved the base layer? How many of them have involved actual weaknesses with the Ethereum base layer? And that's pretty much been zero, because everything that's been hacked has been built on top of it. Okay, so it's all been bugs in the code built on top. So the base layer, just because it's been around for so long and has supported so much, in my opinion, is trustworthy. Is it as decentralized as Bitcoin? No. Okay, but Bitcoin simply can't support the stuff that we're building there. If this is a programmable Bitcoin, it's going to come with a new set of risks. That's my perspective on it. Again, there's like RSK and there's other stuff like that might surface. Arguably even more centralized. I don't know, but it's if we. Man,
I'm waiting for Satoshi to come back out of the woodwork and build the decentralized exchange that decentralized currencies deserve. You know what I mean? Like the Bitcoin of decentralized exchanges, not just the Bitcoin of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I hear you. And one more note on that. Right now, as we speak, and probably being released in the next few weeks, are these bridges between Bitcoin and Ethereum. So we've already had atomic swaps where you can swap Bitcoin over to Ethereum and back and forth atomically without an exchange. That exists already. It's not optimized, but you can do it. But now we're starting to see these bridges where you'll be able to send Bitcoin to a Bitcoin address, and suddenly it appears on Ethereum in a tokenized form. Okay, and once it appears on Ethereum, you can do anything in DeFi with it. So you can lend, you can borrow, you can use the exchanges. There's already leverage trading. They're ramping up the frequency on a lot of the trading decentralized exchanges. So this stuff is all happening. So I hear what you're saying about the ultimate in decentralized blockchains, right? So Satoshi's blockchain, I get it. But as of today, what we have right now on Ethereum is the best we can possibly get right now. It's just
Right.
the best that we
I
like.
just
There's
feel like
no
it's the
other.
equivalent to like e-gold or one of those things like Bitcoin used to become Bitcoin. I feel like all these DeFis are just going to become very small pieces in the pie that will be the decentralized exchange of the future.
There's a really good chance of that,
Uh,
especially with the new bridges being built. The question is, will Ethereum just become the financial app layer of Bitcoin, which is a real possibility, but I mean, we just don't know how it's going to go. I am a blockchain agnostic person. I'm not like an Ethereum like advocate. I'm a DeFi advocate. I believe Bitcoin is the decentralized money, but you need decentralized financial services. Otherwise, you're stuck using centralized financial services.
I just
And
want to question that there's tens of thousands of Ethereum developers. I'm doing some Google
Yeah.
searches right now. There's no source for that. There's headlines around it, but I haven't found the source. Tens of thousands of Ethereum developers.
I can tell you, I just went to ETH Denver. It was my first Ethereum only conference I've ever been to, and there was 2,000 developers there. It blew my mind. If I was walking around this huge space that they had, rainbows here, unicorns there, right? And it's like there was 4 floors, full floors of this like rec space, tables, tables, tables. I was like, where did all these people come from? They were all hacking on Ethereum. In that space alone. This week was ETHCC in Paris, where they had even more people, I believe, in a hackathon. There's a lot of Ethereum developers out there.
Okay, but tens of thousands, like maybe 20,000. If you said,
Well, that is tens of thousands. So thank you.
I guess so. Yeah, it's the smaller portion of 100,000, I guess, right?
I didn't say 100,000.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a mission to get 1 million developers eventually, but they're nowhere close to that yet. In DeFi, I can tell you this: in DeFi, just as far as users go, there's reported about 40 or 50,000 people interacting with the DeFi protocols. My best guess is about maybe half of them are developers, and the other half are actually people like me who come in to use it. So, but yeah, there's a lot of Ethereum developers. People don't realize how big this community is.
I think there's also some misconceptions around Bitcoin's capacity to do smart contracts, and I think we're hopefully going to see a lot more of that in the near future. But most of the focus is happening on the Lightning Network and on this sort of software that's coming to Bitcoin. And Lightning is smart contracts. There's a lot of complex stuff going
Lightning
on.
isn't Bitcoin though.
Yeah, it is.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't. No, it isn't.
It's using Bitcoin.
No, it isn't.
Bitcoin. It's denominated in Bitcoin. It uses Bitcoin as
Lightning is a coupon for Bitcoin that you can redeem for Bitcoin, bro. But Lightning is not Bitcoin. That's why it's a different name, Lightning. Otherwise, it would just be called Bitcoin. Come on, bro.
It is going to be called Bitcoin. That's interesting that we disagree on this. Like, I don't understand why.
I strongly disagree on this.
Like, you're collateralizing Bitcoin. It's fully collateralized Bitcoin. And
if you can't send your Lightning BTC to my BTC wallet, it's not BTC. I'm done with the conversation, bro. I don't want to lose a friend over this, but like, it's not Bitcoin.
That's interesting because now with the new tokenized versions of Bitcoin on Ethereum that I'm talking about, you actually will be able. You will be able to do exactly that. You'll be able to send. You'll be able to send the Bitcoin trustless Bitcoin token directly to a Bitcoin address. There's stuff going on in between.
Centralized exchange will flip it for Ethereum or whatever. Just like if you send Bitcoin to wallet of Satoshi, it'll flip it automatically for Lightning. And you can flip it from Lightning to Bitcoin, or you can send Lightning to a Bitcoin wallet through wallet of Satoshi. So yeah,
Can you do that programmatically, or do you have to?
You're trusting a third party, but you can program that in your own node. And it's the same thing with Ethereum. These bridges are not going to be entirely trustless. There's going to be collateralized multi-sig in the back end because you have to collateralize the Bitcoin and then create a token that's backed by it. Right. I mean, maybe you can do that on an Ethereum contract. I don't know, but again,
I guess the benefit
you have this admin key problem, right? So how decentralized these things are going to be, I think, is to some degree a red herring. I think that think about it. This is analogous to the gun debate in the United States, and I know I'm sort of bringing in a huge topic, but like, here's the thing: you give everybody guns, and then there's centralized risk that there's some maniac with a gun running around. But it means that you're not putting the risk on the system, that the government has to save you, and if the government goes dark, then they take you over, right? with something like small centralized banks, right? Private banking. Yeah, there's private banks that you're trusting, but they're all small, and you're not putting the risk on the system, right? In the current system, there's this massive systemic risk because there's a massive hierarchy of federal fiat that can bail out the banks. You know, on a Bitcoin standard or the way that it used to be in the gold standard, there's a bunch of private banks that nobody could bail out. So if you fuck it up, you lose the money, right? If you make bad loans, you're taking the hit. You have to manage that risk personally, and that requires full human intelligence. And so I think that's the way that it's probably going to end up being again, because AI is not going to be capable of doing that kind of decision for a long time. And unless you're doing KYC, the pop socket accounts are going to keep milking the bugs in the system. And if you're not under collateralizing a loan, then who's loaning the money? Like, what's the point?
I think KYC is going to look a lot different in the future of a successful DeFi adoption, bro.
Yeah, it'd be
really
great to innovate on that. I think like how much can you milk?
Synonymous KYC. I think what Civic Vinny Lingham was up to was really interesting.
Yeah, there's decentralized identity that's being worked on. But I'll tell you this: the main reason I am excited about this field is because I believe that any form of centralized finance is always going to fall under the thumb of the government and under the thumb of regulations and central banks. And I believe the only way out of that is if we create more Bitcoins, and I don't mean more Bitcoins, but more things in the spirit of Bitcoin. We need more pseudonymous code released on Ethereum that's just sort of dropped and then let people run with it, because a big problem that we have is the admin keys. A lot of them are being held by corporations and people that are based in the US. And if the government wants to step in and say, you know what, you have to alter your code in order to meet our regulations, they are capable of doing it. They will do it. If they don't do it, they'll go to jail. Right. So
exactly. So hear me out. If they burn that key and they can't do it, they go to jail, right?
I don't know.
That's why they're not burning their keys. Because if they do and they can't, if they are held accountable for what the technology is that they created, that they let loose into the world, that they can no longer control, they could be held accountable. That's why Satoshi's never going to come forward and be like, I did that Bitcoin thing, because the first thing the US government's going to be like, hey, remember Silk Road? Yeah, get to jail.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at like Ether Delta type situation, there's I don't know if that's really clear yet, but I think you're right in that there's a good chance of that. And that's why I'm not completely convinced that any of the current projects are going to meet the standards I have for decentralization.
Same.
I'm not ruling them out, but I'm not completely convinced because they haven't fully shown me that they're willing to get there. Compound has come the farthest, and they're about to decentralize their governance, and they're going to split up the governance tokens. But the question is, will there still be a handful of people at the top who, if they got together, could make the changes needed to meet those regulations? But like I said before, I think the most exciting stuff is yet to come. And what I'm trying to do is inspire developers who are just coming into this space to think about these issues right up front, right? And to think about, okay, what can I build that I don't need to put my name on, or that I can just set loose? Maybe it's not a huge ecosystem like Compound. Maybe it's small tools here and there, these primitives that kind of can serve as this app layer for people to build on top of. There's a lot of stuff that could happen in the next year or two. But my goal personally is really to build transparency in the space, so people, just a final thing here, like people, my biggest issue is people don't see this stuff. Like, users don't see what we're talking about right now. A lot of people think Compound and Aave and all these things they're using on Ethereum are just as decentralized as Bitcoin. Okay, that's just because people don't know what questions to ask. So on my YouTube channel, I try to reveal, like I just put a video up today about MakerDAO and DAI, and I put a whole section in there about risk, about the possible risks. I linked to a speech from one of the MakerDAO people about risk, because every time I talk about this stuff, I want people to know the risks that come with centralized protocols and products, because I want to inspire people to build the decentralized ones. And I think that's what's going to come next. And it's probably going to happen on Ethereum, okay, whether you like it or not, because it's the best place for it to happen. I can't think, you asked before what other chains are there. I haven't seen any other chains that meet the level of decentralization of Ethereum. Even if you don't think it's fully as decentralized as Bitcoin, it's the closest we've got right now. And I'm not the guy who's going to go out there and build a new chain, right? So it's like, that's my take on it. And, I'm excited about what's to come.
All right. Very, very positive. Let's move to what Juan wanted to say about Steemit, because this is people are actually asking about it in the chat too.
Yeah, Steemit is really interesting. So I'll kind of break down the story a little bit, and I might get some of the terms incorrectly here. I'm gonna make sure I get the right terms. But basically, Tron said that he bought a blockchain, which is just ridiculous, right? And then what actually happened is he bought out Steem Inc., I think, or Steemit Inc. Steemit Inc. is a corporation. I'm not sure where they're based exactly, but it's a corporation that owns the domain name Steemit.com. It also owns a portion, like a significant founder's share that they've been using to kind of like help the community here and there over the years, right? Well, that's what they bought, and they bought certain IP, but most of the Ethereum, the Steem blockchain is actually released in open source under an MIT license. So most of it is open source. There's not not all of it is IP, right? And so that's what Tron bought. That's what Justin Sun's sort of empire purchased, right? And so in retaliation to that, and I'm not sure exactly why this happened, right? But I guess the Steemit people were like, whoa, slow the fuck down, and concerned, I guess, about what Justin might do. I'm not sure what triggered it, but the Steemit community, and because it's a delegated proof of stake system where there's sort of like proof of stake voting that elects, I think it's 21 nodes to be the guardians of the blockchain, the block producers, the block co-signers, so to speak, right? The witnesses. Thank you. They, a lot of them were like, well, okay, we're just going to soft fork the lion's share by Steemit Inc. We're just going to soft fork that into not being useful because we're afraid that lion's share is going to start messing with the natural consensus of, like, the organic consensus of Steemit, right? Well, in retaliation to that, Justin Sun not only voted in a bunch of PopSocket witnesses, but through his influence got Binance, Huobi, and Poloniex. Apparently he owns Poloniex, and then Huobi, I'm not sure what relationship is there, and then got Binance and all of them to use consumer funds in their exchanges, user Steemit, lock them into the Steemit smart contract in order to be able to vote for the delegates that Justin Sun wanted. And that way, he basically undid the soft fork, right? So now they're at a kind of like consensus deadlock where there's no majority that has a unified vision, and all the money that was on those three exchanges, all the Steem that was on those three exchanges, is locked up in a 13-month contract that 13-week contract where the money can't be withdrawn. It has to be withdrawn, 1/13 a week at a time, right? So now these exchanges have this liquidity risk where all the Steemit community, of course, is pissed. And so if they try to withdraw their Steemit, that Steemit is not going to be available for withdrawal. So what does the exchange have to do? Well, they're going to have to buy it on the market and sell it, right? And that's going to start creating liquidity and accounting balance problems for the exchanges. So that's the hot potato that they're trying to resolve right now. I just listened to a portion of a public kind of town hall yesterday where Justin Sun and his guy Roy they were talking with some of the witnesses, and they're trying to like figure this out. And as far as I can tell, Justin Sun's top priority is hard forking Steemit out of that 13-week time lock so that he can bail out the exchanges. And the developers are like, best case scenario, you need a month. You get 4 weeks. We can reduce it to 4 weeks. Best case scenario, possibly theoretically, but it's not safe to hard fork and break this fundamental part of the theory of the Steemit consensus, right? So the exchanges are going to bite the bullet here. Justin Sun is in a an embarrassing position, which is very bad for the Chinese. You shouldn't be embarrassed as a Chinese person. And I mean, I think it's really a great example of not just the weakness of proof of stake in a market that with massive centralization of wealth in exchanges, but also a weakness of delegated proof of stake, right? And how, again, we could bring it back to Ethereum, but like just delegated proof of stake alone it gets very political sometimes, and that's what we're seeing right now. So, going forward, they're trying to find a peaceful path. Long story short, the current demands from the Steemit community is that Tron forego their voting rights of their shares and make some donations to the Steem community funds to sort of fund development and such. And then Justin Sun just wants to bail out the exchanges because he probably, like, from what I heard from Binance was like, oh, we thought this was like a regular update type of thing, which sounds like nonsense, right? But they're trying to like not take the heat on it. I think they're gonna take some heat. I think they're gonna pay the consequences of playing politics in crypto, and it's very analogous to the Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin fork, because it was this sort of corporate consensus that was parallel to the grassroots consensus, and that tension is being felt. And this is proof that running a node does help. Granted, proof of stake is different, and they actually it was a proof of stake fork, but anyway, very, very entertaining drama, and I'm trying to keep an eye on it.
Well, if you want to pay attention to this more closely, what's probably the toppest of the top tier information, I will say I've been following Aggroed001.
That's right.
That's AGGROED001 on Twitter. Highly recommend you follow Aggroed001 for information on this. And
he's the founder of Splinterlands.
Splinterlands, Steem Engine, the Steem keychain. I mean, literally everything built on Steem besides Steemit, this guy helped build. So I've been following him very, very closely the past few days, man. And yeah, you pretty much hit it all on the head, bro. I mean, I think this is beautiful, though. I mean, maybe Chris or Adam may disagree, but I think this is beautiful. I love seeing this. I want to call it a war, but it's not, because this is exactly how it should be playing out. Everything that's happening, the way it's happening, is the only way it was ever going to happen. I mean, the people that didn't realize that Steemit was a centralized corporation utilizing decentralized technology that was the Steem blockchain. I think it's Darwinism, but the way that the governance model, the politics is playing out, I think it's beautiful. It will be historic. People will look back at this much like the DAO and the Bitcoin BCH hard fork, and this will be a precedent for what to expect as a catalyst for future events in proof of stake and governance environments. And I think it's beautiful. However it happens, positive or negative for either side, it's good for the industry as a whole that it is happening in general.
Yeah, this is precedent setting. The game theory is being hard tested with high stakes on Steemit, and this is going to have a big impact on how EOS, for example, if they're doing anything still. I don't really ever hear about them anymore. How they think about the game theory, but it's also going to affect Ethereum's game theory, because as far as I understand, and again, the things seem to change relatively fast in Ethereum, but if Ethereum forks into a proof of stake model where they're using collateralized proof of stake in order to achieve some kind of consensus, then that money on the exchanges is going to be part of the bet, right? And not only like today, it's some very ambitious Justin Sung kind of playing power games and consolidating centralized shitcoins together, like a great Genghis Khan of shitcoins, But tomorrow it might be a government, right? Like the regulators could be like, hey, you're gonna have to support this soft fork, right? And
that's why I think what's happening in India is pretty interesting too, to see the bank try to fight with the Supreme Court. I'm like, I never really would have thought banks thought they had so much power when it came to government and the court. Right. But damn, India has proven otherwise, right?
That's great. Yeah.
Banks
India
pretty much will be their own Supreme Court.
What's the aggro? What's the aggro, guys? So I like the experiment too. I'm with Ken. I'm like, the people. It's interesting to see how this is all going to play out. But what's that aggro, guys? I want to look them up real quick.
It's on Twitter. It's AGGROED001.
Okay. Oh, there he is. Okay, I'll add that under the notes. Chris, do you have anything to say about all this stuff? Because there was a little bit of Ethereum stuff in there.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's a little it does get a little outside of my scope, to be honest with you. But one thing that I did learn that was a key difference, I believe, between the Steemit situation and Ethereum is that with proof of stake, as Ethereum is planning it, the validators are only going to be verifying the blocks. They're not going to be involved in governance, right? So yes, they could support a fork, but then all the other nodes would have to support that fork. Okay, and with the size of Ethereum, it's pretty unlikely that somebody would be able to get a majority fork. That's my understanding of it. So, and I know that this has been coming a lot of Vitalik, and I've been following his tweets about it. He's making a point consistently to say that proof of stake, as Ethereum's planning it, does not equal the coin voting. That's sort of what has been going on here and causing a lot of the problems. So again, it's a little outside of my scope. I might have said something wrong there, but I am seeing that there is a difference in what's being talked about with Steemit versus what Ethereum is actually planning. So I encourage everybody to do their own research on it.
I want to say with the Steem people, if there really are Steem fans out there that keep their Steem on an exchange, I mean, this is what you get, man. You gave the exchanges power. It is so control your own private key, whatever darn coin you have. You should have Bitcoin, people. But for some reason, if you're valuing your wealth in Steem, I can't believe you're keeping it on their freaking on Binance, and because this is what it leads to. You gave them.
Centralization risk on top of centralization risk.
Yeah, that's why I worry about Litecoin, man. Look how much Litecoin Coinbase is in possession of. You know, it's a lot. I look at these exchanges and try to see if they have like a 30-40% majority of a lot of these coins, and you'd be shocked to find out how many have a significant stake in these games because of how many people use their exchange to hold their coins, not realizing they're creating centralized, monoliths in the space and dwindling their individual powers, man. It's just. And
how many Litecoin does Coinbase have?
I believe it's about 50%, 50-something%.
Whoa! Well, I've never read. I need some stats. I'm going to do some research there. That would be.
Coinbase is one of the largest Litecoin holders, period.
But 50% of all, I mean, that would be amazing.
Yeah, well, look at their you could go back to 2017, 2018 run where we saw, 300,000 new people joining Coinbase every month. They were having millions of people within quarters of their year joining, and it's not without possibility to see this happening. And more as this space goes on with these, coins as they come out, we'll see become centralized due to exchange power. And this is why I love watching what's happening with Steem right now and Justin Sun and everything. This is going to be that precedential momentous history. We're going to be like the Steemit versus Tron, like a court of law mention when things happen or are expected to happen, because this is going to be played out in other blockchains. This isn't just a Steem issue or a Steemit issue. This isn't, centralized to just their blockchain for their governance model. This is all of the blockchains that use this governance model have a potential outcome of this.
I also like the corporate takeover. This is the first big corporate takeover type of attempt here, whether it be of the site or the blockchain, whatever way you want to interpret it. Yep. I would think, I don't know, if I was a big Steemit fan and held a lot of Steem, I would be happy that Justin Sun was taken over from Ned or whoever.
Thank you. I agree with you, Adam, 100%. I am
excited. He's a fucker of all coins. I mean, it'll bring up. He's a respectable CEO. Well, he's a CEO. I don't know the dude personally, but he. It's a more professional take than what was going on before. That Steemit never changed. It always looked the same.
Thank you. It was forever beta. It was so boring. Yeah. It died the day it was born, in my opinion. Steemit was a stillborn project. Everybody kept resuscitating, taking turns blowing air and pumping its heart. I felt so bad for Steem whales as Steem kept growing older and never getting better.
Yeah. Well, hey everyone, pound that like button now. Okay, we'll move off the Steemit thing.
I can throw one more thing in there about Ethereum and DeFi that is sort of a risk in this regard, even if the kind of damage that's happening with Steem is pretty unlikely, I think, with the proof of stake on Ethereum. there's still the chance of forks. And there, with the power consolidation that's happening with DeFi, something that came up in the past couple of weeks was a potential hard fork with the POW, progressive proof of work situation that was averted. But if there ever is a situation where two competing forks come up with Ethereum, DeFi has some serious problems, because the projects that are supporting, and I'm talking about DeFi as it currently exists in a centralized fashion, because the companies that are supporting these projects would need to pick a chain. And as power gets consolidated by like MakerDAO and some other projects, who knows? Why wouldn't we maybe see a day where MakerDAO wants to push its weight around and does a governance vote that supports a hard fork to support some specific agenda that they have, and then all the rest of DeFi has to follow them. Because if they don't, the whole system breaks. Nobody can use DAI on the new chain because it's not being supported by MakerDAO's foundation. So there's a lot of situations where hard forks in Ethereum could really screw up DeFi. So that's why it's going to be really interesting over the next couple of years to see if a hard fork does come up that's contested. It'll probably be squashed like the one that just happened. So it's until it can't be anymore.
Chris, I love that. Thank you for putting that in my mind. I'm definitely going to have to dive down that rabbit hole.
Sure.
Yeah, I was going to actually ask you about that, because I'm glad you brought that up, man. So I don't see how anybody in their right mind would want to fork Ethereum at this point with all that. I mean, with your DeFi bread and butter would be totally at risk there. I mean, it would.
Everybody's got to follow the same chain, or else we're in trouble. At least all the DeFi protocols, because like I said,
could collude. They could come together. The DeFi exchanges could collude and pool their weight together, if not strong enough independently. And we could see the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance have another alliance to deal with.
That's right.
All right. I'm glad that was brought up. By the way, all these guys' Twitters are below, and from their Twitters, you can see the videos they're in and all that stuff. That's why I just give the Twitter. But I did give Chris's special DeFi site down there also. But Chris has got good videos. Kenn's got good. They tweet them out all the time and everything. Juan's got good videos. So yeah, again, when I give a Twitter, people, you read the whole treat it like a blog. Go down. They've got great stuff there. All right, I sent this article out to you guys. I don't know if you guys looked at it or not, but the Brad Mills Windfall game survey. Did you get to look at that, Chris, at all?
I unfortunately did not.
Oh man. Did any of you guys get to look at that? Just to see the question. He actually had a professional survey out there finally saying to beyond Bitcoin people just outside of our world, saying, hey, if you had 10 years and what would you want your $10,000 in? Would you want it in Bitcoin or gold or
the Federal Reserve notes or a 10 years U.S. Treasury bond?
Yeah, so you saw that. You saw that thing.
Yeah, it's funny. I thought that the Federal Reserve notes would have, because of who he is, right? Because, who his audience is or whatever. I thought they would have just said cash is king. I thought we would have just got one of those, boomer answers, and we didn't, which is pretty interesting.
Well, at first it was. But then when they got the education, it wasn't. They asked the question at the beginning of the survey and then at the end of the survey. And but in the middle of the survey was it was questions about how great Bitcoin was. So I think the point that why I liked it so much is that when people understand what Bitcoin is, they pick it as a long-term investment. But most people don't understand what Bitcoin is right now. That was I think that came out of the survey. Anyway, I linked to the survay below.
It had 920 votes for those wondering. It wasn't like we.
No, I don't. Was that it? I mean, I'm talking about I don't know how many people were on the survey. It was 920. I don't know.
I think so. I'm looking at it now, trying to pull some of the information, like Ron Paul's original, which it looks like.
No, but that's different. That's
right. That's different. That one had 70,000 votes, and that's why I'm correlating the response though. And the other one by Brad Mills, it says it had 920 votes, and that might have changed obviously as it went. This is during the time of the screenshot of his report.
When it says 920 votes, that. I think that was his initial question to Twitter people, but the survey itself was beyond Twitter.
There's a PDF in here too.
Yeah. Oh, there it is. All right. I'm sorry. I'm trying to look it up now so I can get the numbers
Yeah. Well, anyway, I don't know. Juan, did you get a chance to look at that at all? Or
I mean,
oh, please, Chris. Yeah.
yeah, I think like you said, I'm just looking at it now, and it says 40% of the respondents believe Bitcoin is controlled by a company. And it really it says 62% just want to learn more about Bitcoin because they don't know enough to be able to answer this right. So this shows different results than the Twitter survey.
Yes,
It
because
looks like
it's
Bitcoin.
different. It's
Right.
different people. It's a scientific survey. Finally, we got a real survey instead of
Wow,
people
men were more likely to say US dollar than women? Interesting.
at first. Yeah, at first.
Yeah, but I mean that just means women are more
It
into.
breaks it down by demographic. It's a really interesting survey, people, and it's finally a scientific one. So check it out.
And Bitcoin still came out ahead. In which form would you want this?
Yeah, that's the
gift?
interesting part.
Bitcoin still comes out ahead, followed by US dollars and then gold.
Yeah,
So-
after they got educated, were educated.
It's funny, gold got the bronze medal.
Interesting way of looking at it.
Sorry, Peter Schiff.
All right, Juan, did you have any thoughts on that thing, on that survey?
I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I think the most important takeaway here is that Generation X, Millennials, and Z are the ones that are most interested in Bitcoin. Yep. Boomers, not so much. Surprise. This is a long multi-generational game. We got to go for the young people. They're the ones that are going to be computer literate. They're going to be the ones that are going to be willing to. I mean, this is the reality of young people today, is that they don't have loyalty to platforms. They hop around, right? They move from Snapchat to TikTok to before TikTok was Musical.ly, and then they just hop around social networks. They don't care to build reputation on social networks like we do, apparently, as much. So I think they're gonna be the ones that are gonna be tech literate, and they're gonna be trying out a lot of this technology. Yeah, boomers are gonna outsource it to their wealth manager. It's like, okay, if you think it makes sense, I guess go for it, right? Because that's the world they grew up in, and I don't think that's gonna change. I think we need to invest in the youth right now, and that'll pay off big time in the next 10, 20 years.
Speaking of that right there,
Yes.
I just stumbled on something really interesting in this survey, which is question 9. And question 9 was, who do you think creates new US dollars? Is it the Treasury, the President, Congress, or the Federal Reserve? And half the people, the number one answer was the Treasury, which is incorrect. It's the Federal Reserve. But then it breaks it down into age groups. And the age group that got the right answer the most out of everybody was millennials. More millennials than any other age group knew that the Federal Reserve was responsible for creating new dollars. And why do you think that is? I'm going to guess right now that that's because of crypto. I think that once you get into crypto and you understand Bitcoin, you start to learn about the economy. You start to learn about the nature of money. You start to learn about fiat and how dollars are created. And Bitcoin is overwhelmingly millennial. So I think that has a lot to do with the education. And I think that these are the people, millennials today, and specifically this crowd that we're talking about here, is going to decide the future of money.
Yeah. And again, education, once they got that education and understood, they made the right choice and picked Bitcoin. But interesting theory about why they that group knew about the Federal Reserve and the other ones didn't seem to as much. All right. Did any of you guys have commented on that survey before?
Yeah, man, you said education. I thought that was hilarious because I'm looking at this SES effects. Did you see that one? Yo, the richest people are the dumbest people in the room. 9 out of 10 times.
Sometimes, but the richest people were the ones most likely to buy Bitcoin at first too.
Right. Yeah. I'm looking at the wealthy were most likely to think the US dollar was backed by the gold reserves in Fort Knox, 42%, and less likely to think it was backed by nothing. And contrary to the poverty obviously knew that the US dollar was backed by nothing. So it's funny to see that, the larger your pockets, the smaller your mind may be sometimes, because you do subcontract out a lot of life experience or a lot of what you would normally do, or learn. You just kind of subsidize to the servants beneath you, and the servants beneath you end up learning a hell of a lot more than you know about your own business.
If you're wealthy, what's it matter where the money came from? You got the money.
That's a good point, right? Yeah.
To that
Chris,
point, on
yeah.
the same page of that survey, it says, what was the percentage by wealth level of people who got the right answer to the question, who controls Bitcoin? The right answer was nobody, or the users. And the top the top age group that got it right was millennials below the poverty line. So it's like poor millennials
Young,
got it
dumb,
right.
and full of Bitcoin.
And
they have-
wealthy older people got it wrong.
But young millennials that are poor. They're on the internet more, probably, like trying to learn, trying to figure out how to like get out of the situation. Maybe that's
And they're tripping and falling into it. A lot of this, they're learning by just elbow room conversation, water cooler talk in high school and in their groups. It's the cryptocurrency is the topic of conversation for millennials right now. So even if you're not going out of your way to learn about it, you're gonna end up hearing about it through like Facebook or through Xbox, live chat or something, when you're gaming. Either way, I think it's coming up a lot more younger, poorer conversations than it is for the older, wealthier. And that's actually like a really interesting, to think about the educational distribution of what's happening right now. Is there's a very big unbalance of understanding and education on what this is. And the wealthy, the boomers, they don't have that advantage that the millennials have, that so take advantage of it, guys. We know more than them.
All right. Okay, let's get toward the end. We've had a long show here today. I do want to ask Juan Galt real quick. Juan Galt only question. You had ugly old goat on, and you were talking about Bitcoin dominance. What do you have anything to say about Bitcoin dominance on this show today?
Yeah, we're talking a lot about that. I mean, I think we were kind of talking about the libertarian economic theory and some of the myths that are there. This is one of the things that I've mentioned was the theory of private banking. There's an article called "The Lost Art of Commercial Banking," which I highly recommend. I tweeted it out, and I'll tweet it again, and I think everybody should read it. I'm going through it right now. It reads kind of like a white paper. It's about 8 pages long, and it's about private banking during the gold standard and how that developed. In private banking, in an environment where there's no Federal Reserve Bank to bail them out, right? And I think that's what Ethereum should be looking at. I think that's what Bitcoin should be looking at. I think that's what fintech people should be looking at in a world that unpegs from the dollar as a currency. The other thing was that I think it was Murray Rothbard that Ugly apparently wrote an article back in the day calling Murray Rothbard a gold socialist, because apparently Murray Rothbard wanted to make fiat currency legal, right? And on first sight, it's like, yeah, but on second sight, it's like, wait a second, you want to enforce a gold standard? That's wrong. It needs to compete in the free market and win. And so that was really interesting. And so that's kind of like a, matrix cracking our idea. So anyway, we talked about some of those things and about what it means to have Bitcoin as the standard. I think you guys had to go check it out because it's a really good show. And there's generally some updates about Ugly's newsletter and what we're going to be doing moving forward. We're going to be having a Bitcoin Standard Academy here in Ensenada, Mexico, and Baja California for traders and people that are looking to increase their mastery of how to use Bitcoin and some of these cryptocurrencies, primarily Bitcoin, really. How to do, OPSEC and online security, and how to, mitigate some of these big hack risks, right? Like SIM card hacks and stuff like that. So we're gonna merge money management with OPSEC education, and that's gonna be the Bitcoin Standard Academy around May 15th. Is I think we're aiming at it. So keep an eye out on Ugly's and my Twitter account and stuff.
All right, cool. And anything else you want to add? Conclusionary thoughts, since we're at the end of the show.
Yeah, I mean, I missed Chris's response on the proof of stake Ethereum thing. I mean, I'd love to get something.
You can go you can go to Adam Weiser's YouTube channel and watch the.
Yeah, I have to go listen to it. I mean, I wanted to engage in that a little bit. Hang on, give me a second.
Well, I can mute you. That you got that extra. Is that? Okay, yeah, there you took care of it.
Yeah, good. Jitsi finally installed in my phone, and then suddenly started echoing everything. Yeah, so I mean, I don't know. I think it's interesting, right? Like the consensus risk of exchanges holding a lot of Ethereum if it's a proof of stake currency. I mean, that can't not have an important effect on consensus, right? And the fact that that's separated in Bitcoin, right? Like the stake and proof of work are completely separated in Bitcoin. That might prove to be a big difference in the future.
All right. Did you want Chris to say something about that, or
yeah? I mean, if you have any thoughts on that, Chris, and then we can maybe talk about it more some other time.
I mean, I don't want to repeat what I said before too much, but
Sure.
basically, I said it's definitely out of my scope. I'm not an Ethereum defender. I'm a blockchain agnostic type of guy. I also brought up that I have been following Vitalik's thoughts on this, and he's made it clear over and over that Ethereum proof of stake is not going to support any code decisions, any governance decisions. It's specifically for validating blocks. My understanding of it, which is limited,
That's what it is. That's what a
my
consensus
understanding
is.
of it is
Right.
my understanding is that a fork is absolutely possible, right? If consolidation occurs, and the biggest risk is going to be the DeFi, and I went through this before about how DeFi needs to be on the same fork, or else things just fall apart because everything is connected, right?
Mhm.
So I think the bigger risk that we need to be worried about as DeFi grows and takes market share from centralized exchanges with regard to Ethereum, which I believe it will, is how DeFi projects are going to want to make these decisions and sort of run away with a fork that meets their needs. So
Mhm.
I think that's the bigger concern for Ethereum long term than centralization on exchange. If DeFi grows the way I think it's going to, so we'll have to see.
I suspect this Ethereum, this Steemit drama, depending on how it ends, whether it ends in a Steemit fork or whether it ends on a peaceful resolution between Tron and Steem, which I think would be positive for everybody involved. I think, despite Justin Sun's shrewd power games, and he that is what he does. I mean, you gotta go listen to that YouTube video where they're negotiating the resolution. I mean, Jesus Christ, this guy is like a politician. It's like straight up political talk. But he's a peacekeeper, and to some degree, he's just trying to like move forward, very pragmatic, not really interested in principles. But he can bring about a huge growth to Steemit, I think. And depending on how this plays out, I think this could have some consequences for the development of proof of stake in Ethereum, right? Because that's going to be a contentious battle the day that it comes. A lot of there's a contingent of Ethereum people that don't want to move to proof of stake, as far as I understand, and the miners are definitely invested in proof of work in Ethereum. So this could be this is good. This is adding another weapon to that debate. If I'm explaining myself well.
Yes, you
and
are.
again, I think regardless of how Ethereum moves forward, the risk still exists always. It's existential to DeFi with contentious hard forks. So it almost at a certain point doesn't matter anymore how they happen. The question is, are they possible? Are there vested interests that could bring them about? And how would it affect the ecosystem we're building, which is this giant, I don't want to call it a house of cards necessarily. People like to say money Legos, but it is in a sense a kind of a house of cards only when you think about the fork potential. Okay, because if it forks and then they go separate ways, then there's a big problem.
That's funny. I actually called DeFi a house of cards on a house of cards once, and people got all upset because I feel like Ethereum's already a house of cards, and you're going to build a house of cards on that. But I'm excited to see where it comes from this experiment. I think Ethereum will learn a lot from what's happening with Steemit and Steem and Justin Sun.
All right, Ken, since we got you here, what are your conclusionary thoughts? Any story you wanted to bring up that got left out? Anything?
I did mention it subtly, but I thought that what's happening in India right now, where the banks are clashing with the Supreme Court for the ban on cryptos, I think is again, it's outside of crypto, but again, a precedential event in our historical paradigm shift of currency and technology and wealth distribution. Man, like the banks are full on trying their best to survive and fight back against this. You know, it's like if Blockbuster was in the room when Netflix was asking for a loan, you know, it's like, of course they wouldn't have got it. And the Supreme Court has obviously ruled in favor of cryptocurrencies, but the Reserve Bank of India is not happy. They're claiming that it is detrimental to the local currency, and there's no evidence to prove this, but their FUD could be causing their evidence. You know, it's insane. Like, you know, a bank saying that the money isn't going to be doing good if the government is doing this, which they are doing, they're causing their own fruitions, you know, and that's why they don't have the proof of their claims today, but they will, because they're causing it, and they'll correlate that to the cryptocurrency adoption. But yeah, I mean, India is huge, and I want to see what happens there, and I'm looking at it through rose tinted glasses at the moment, you know, because the skeptical me with my tinfoil hat on so tight, it's the China ban all over again. You know, we've been dealing with India for a while now with this, and I'm just curious to see when we're going to see, you know, the bank lobby their way into the Supreme Court's pocket and get this reversed. And then whatever, 6 months later, they decide to do it again so they can get paid again. And it just keeps becoming this laundering, extorting, you know, lobbying circle that never ends in India.
Financial Game of Thrones.
Yeah, it went in China forever, man. It was just a way for the politicians to get a bunch of money in their pocket from the crypto pro lobbyists, right? So it's like, we ban it, then they get paid. Okay, it's unbanned. The money runs out. We ban it again. We get paid. We unban it. India, this could be a very similar event, but hopefully not.
I'll say this. I was initially happy when it was 2 days ago now that they said Bitcoin or cryptocurrency was legal. But I said on the show, India is notorious for its bureaucracy and holding everything up. And look, they're trying to hold it up, create bureaucracy. They're corrupt. It's an incredibly corrupt bureaucracy too. So I wouldn't be surprised if your scenario comes true. Like
the corruption
it's legal, then it's illegal, then we bribe, then it's legal, then we bribe, then
I have an interesting little insight into this. I'm friends with Sonny Ray, who founded and ran one of the biggest Indian exchanges. And the moment that this happened, he sent me a message. He's like, "We beat him," you know. And I think he sent me a link to an article and such. So I think I'm a little bit more optimistic, you know, like there's a difference between an administrative ruling to ban a thing as a Communist Party of China would do, and a Supreme Court decision in what appears to be a country with a Supreme Court. I guess they have some common law and sort of European influence there. And so that should be like those Supreme Court decisions tend to take a long time. And that ban lasted like 3 years. It was really brutal. But now, you know, that ruling, that's a very deep change. So if there's any other attacks on crypto, they're probably going to be administrative and they're not going to be at a constitutional sort of like, you know, level, so to speak. So I think this is very good for India and for crypto. It's a good sign. In India, I mean, there's a lot of money there, you know. So if maybe that's the beginning of the next bull market, you know.
I agree. It could be the South Korea. South Korea went wild in late 2017, buying up a bunch of crypto. Hopefully one day it'll be India, because India's got a lot more people, and although most of them don't have access to the internet or whatever, but everyone understands the potential. Second most populated country on earth, etc. All right, Chris, you got the final word.
Final word. So I would encourage everybody listening to this to pay attention to, even if you never plan to use DeFi on Ethereum, pay attention to the Bitcoin projects that are occurring, that are going to be building these trustless bridges that we talked about before. And I'll tell you a couple to look at. I'm not involved with any of them, but I'm observing them closely. TBTC is one, Trusted Bitcoin from Keep Project. There's Ren Project. And then one was announced yesterday called P Tokens, which is a pretty centralized version. But the other two are more trustless, still at levels of centralization. Just pay attention, because what's going to start happening is more and more Bitcoin is going to be traded on Ethereum. And even today, as of today, there's a centralized solution for tokenizing Bitcoin called Wrapped Bitcoin that you can use on Ethereum. There is just as much, if not more, Bitcoin trading on Ethereum right now than Lightning Network. Okay, they're pretty much head and head, neck and neck. Okay,
Wow.
so it's around 8 million on Lightning and around 8 million trading on Ethereum. Once these new bridges open up, that's going to double, triple, quadruple. So, we've got the Bitcoin crowd that we know are like, the hardcore never use Ethereum people. Think about all the people who are just holding Bitcoin, have been sitting on it since 2017, and just maybe want to earn some interest without having to go into a centralized exchange and do KYC. Those are people who might take advantage of this to just shift it over, leave it in Compound or one of these protocols, and just wait and see what happens. Pay attention to it. If nothing else, it's going to be an important story.
I just want to say that, as somebody that wants Bitcoin to be currency and believes that Bitcoin is the best currency that we can probably play with right now, especially in the digital age, this to me is a good sign. If Ethereum is going to start denominating their contracts in Bitcoin and taking the systemic risk, go for it, right? Let users sort of play with that, and hopefully they'll educate users properly on that. But yeah, it's the denomination and I think there's been a lot of debate about sort of the maximalist versus shitcoins and stuff. I think the critical critique that Bitcoiners have against altcoins is the fact that they're trying to create a new unit of account, and they're trying to create with worse fundamentals and worse distribution, right? Just build on Bitcoin, and this is a kind of building with Bitcoin. So I think that's great. That's really great news.
Yeah, I mean, ETH has to remain the base layer, obviously, and it has to be the securing asset, which is what makes this whole thing very interesting. Where you have ETH securing the Ethereum network, and then this growing amount of Bitcoin that's being traded on top of that. So that's where it gets kind of
Is it fully
interesting to watch.
collateralized? Like it's fully collateralized Bitcoin
These
with
new versions are
TBTC floating on, right?
TBTC, REN BTC, PBTC. These new versions of BT and even wrapped Bitcoin is fully collateralized
Right.
but it's custodial with BitGo.
Right.
These new versions are aiming towards trustlessness, so you can still find centralized aspects if you dig deep enough, but they're closer. Okay, and eventually we're going to get completely trustless, and then we're going to have this fluid sort of back and forth, and it's going to be programmatic, and you won't even know it's happening. And 10 years from now, we're going to start laughing that we went through so much trouble trying to get cross-chain, because it's going to be so fluid that it won't even matter. The big question is that ETH, right? And a lot of people think, okay, ETH just it will organically rise in value to secure the level of Bitcoin that is brought over. So it's a big question, because if the amount of Bitcoin exceeds what it's got underlying it, then you got problems, right? Especially if you can programmatically redeem your token back for Bitcoin. A lot of questions, but that's why I'm saying keep an eye on it. It's going to be a big story this year.
All right, man.
All right. Golden age, man. So many cool things going on in this space. Yeah, 10 years is going to be a lot different, but this decade is going to be the golden age. It's going to be great. Compete, don't complain. Keep on being creative, people. All right, that is the end of the show. It was a very good show today, guys. Wow. I'm Adam Meister. Thank you, guest. The Bitcoin Meister, the Disrupt Meister. Remember, subscribe to this channel, like this video, share this video, check out the links below. Also remember, at the end of the month, Bitcoin 2020 in San Francisco. If you're going to be in San Francisco, contact me. Dude, this event better keep on. It's going to happen. I'm not afraid to meet people in person in San Francisco to talk Bitcoin 2020. I should have mentioned at the beginning of the show when people were asking, are you going to travel soon? Still, yeah, of course. I'm traveling for Bitcoin San Francisco, but who knows? Who knows, guys? May this sickness go away soon and everybody get back to normal. But Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Have a great time today, and pound the like button. And we do this show every Friday. Be back next week. I do a new show here every day. So tomorrow's the Beyond Bitcoin show. Again, this was a great show. Really, really good combo of people. You don't hear this stuff. Best guest in the space, guys. We will see you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye. Good night.
Awesome.
Have a day.
Yeah.